In the mid-15th century, the world stood on the brink of a monumental shift, a clash of ages that would echo through history. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, centered around the legendary city of Constantinople. To understand the gravity of what was about to unfold, we must first look at the two great powers involved. On one side, we have the Byzantine Empire, a civilization that had endured for over 1,000 years. But by 1453, it was a ghost of its former glory. This was not a sudden decline, it was a long, slow decay. A catastrophic blow had been struck over 2 centuries earlier, not by an Eastern foe but by fellow Christians. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 saw Western knights sack and occupy Constantinople, a betrayal that shattered the empire's heart. It never truly recovered. The once vast territories that stretched from Italy to the Levant were gone, nibbled away by relentless wars and internal power struggles. The empire was plagued by civil wars, with ambitious nobles and rival claimants to the throne fighting for control of a dwindling prize. This constant political instability drained the treasury and weakened the military, making it impossible to mount a sustained defense against its many enemies. By the 1450s, the mighty Roman Empire of the East was reduced to little more than the city of Constantinople itself, a few islands in the Aegean, and a sliver of land in southern Greece. It was an island in a sea of enemies, a hollow crown waiting to fall. On the other side, a new vibrant power was on the rise, the Ottoman Empire. This was a state forged in the crucible of conquest, expanding with unstoppable momentum. At its head was a young, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious ruler, Sultan Mehmed II. He was only 21 years old, but he possessed a strategic mind and an iron will that belied his age. Mehmed was not just a warrior, he was a visionary. He saw Constantinople not just as a prize, but as the rightful heart of his new empire. His ambition was singular and all-consuming, to conquer the city that had defied his ancestors for generations. To achieve this, he marshaled the full might of his empire. The Ottomans had vast economic resources, drawn from their extensive territories in both Asia and Europe. This wealth funded a massive professional army, disciplined and battle-hardened. Crucially, Mehmed had already strategically encircled Constantinople. His father and grandfather had conquered the surrounding lands, effectively turning the city into an isolated Christian outpost deep within Ottoman territory. They controlled the Balkans to the west and Anatolia to the east. Mehmed solidified this stranglehold by building a fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus Strait, directly opposite an existing one on the Asian side. This gave him complete control over the narrow waterway, cutting off any potential aid to the city from the Black Sea. The Ottoman juggernaut was in position, poised for the final strike. The fate of the city would ultimately hinge on a classic contest, an immovable object versus an unstoppable force. Constantinople's primary defense was the stuff of legend, the Theodosian walls. This was arguably the most formidable defensive system of the entire medieval world. For over 1,000 years, these walls had repelled countless sieges from Avars, Arabs, Bulgars, and others. They were not just a single barrier, but a complex, multi-layered system. An outer moat, a low outer wall, and then the massive inner wall, studded with towers, created a killing ground for any attacker who dared to approach. Generations of Byzantines had placed their faith in these impenetrable fortifications. They were a symbol of the city's endurance, a stone testament to its perceived invincibility. But the unstoppable force was bringing something new, a technology that would change the very nature of warfare: gunpowder. Sultan Mehmed was obsessed with artillery. He gathered the best engineers and cannon founders from across Europe, including a Hungarian master named Orban. He commissioned the creation of monstrous siege cannons, larger than anything the world had ever seen. The most famous of these was the Great Turkish Bombard, a behemoth that required hundreds of men to move and operate. It could hurl massive stone balls weighing over half a ton at the city's ancient defenses. This was the clash at the heart of the siege: the timeless strength of medieval stone walls versus the revolutionary power of modern artillery. The legendary Theodosian walls, which had stood defiant for a millennium, were about to face their greatest test. The world watched, holding its breath, as the old age of castles and ramparts collided head-on with the dawn of the age of gunpowder. We delve into the heart of the battle, the siege that would change the course of history. Picture this: the mighty Theodosian walls, a triple line of fortifications that had protected Constantinople for over 1,000 years, standing as a symbol of Byzantine invincibility. For centuries, they had repelled countless armies. But this time was different. Sultan Mehmed II brought with him a new and terrifying weapon that would signal the end of an era for medieval fortifications: massive cannons. Chief among them was the legendary urban cannon, a monstrous piece of artillery so large it was said to require a team of 60 oxen to move and could fire a 1,200-pound stone ball over a mile. The cannon was the creation of a Hungarian engineer named Urban, who had first offered his services to the Byzantines. But they couldn't afford his price, a decision that would prove catastrophic. So, Urban went to Mehmed, who welcomed him with open arms and gave him all the resources he needed. The psychological impact of this cannon was immense. The ground shook with each thunderous blast. The sound echoed for miles, a constant, terrifying reminder of the impending doom. Day after day, the Ottoman artillery relentlessly pounded the ancient walls, while the defenders, a mix of Byzantines and their Genoese and Venetian allies, worked tirelessly to repair the damage under the cover of night. It was a losing battle. The sheer brute force of the cannons was something the world had never seen on this scale. The stone and mortar that had stood for a millennium began to crumble. Cracks appeared, then grew into breaches. The once impregnable walls were slowly but surely being pulverized, marking a pivotal moment in military history. The age of cannon-proof castles was over. While the land walls were under constant assault, the Byzantines had another crucial line of defense: the Golden Horn. This natural inlet provided a secure harbor for their navy and protected the city's weaker northern sea walls. To block any enemy ships from entering, the defenders had stretched a colossal iron chain across the mouth of the harbor, from the city proper to the Genoese colony of Galata on the other side. This chain, supported by wooden floats, was a formidable obstacle, seemingly making a naval attack on this flank impossible. The Ottoman fleet, impressive in its own right, was completely stymied by this simple yet effective defense. They tried to break the chain, but the Byzantine and Genoese ships guarding it easily repelled their efforts. For weeks, the Golden Horn remained a safe haven, a frustrating thorn in Mehmed's side. The Sultan knew he had to find a way to get his ships into that harbor to stretch the city's limited defenders even thinner. A direct assault on the chain was failing. He needed a solution that was not just bold, but utterly unthinkable. And so Mehmed conceived one of the most audacious and brilliant strategic moves in the history of warfare. If he couldn't sail his ships into the Golden Horn, he would take them overland. It sounds like something out of a myth, but it was very real. On the night of April 22nd, under the cloak of darkness, the Ottomans executed this incredible plan. Thousands of men worked to construct a roadway of greased logs and timbers, creating a slipway that ran from the Bosphorus, up and over the hill behind the Genoese colony of Galata, and down into the waters of the Golden Horn. Imagine the sheer spectacle. Teams of oxen and men hauled dozens of smaller Ottoman warships, one by one, out of the water and dragged them overland on this makeshift road. To distract the defenders and cover the noise, Mehmed ordered a massive cannonade against the land walls. The Byzantines, preoccupied with the bombardment, were completely oblivious to the unbelievable feat happening just over the hill. When morning dawned, the defenders of Constantinople looked out at the Golden Horn in disbelief and horror. Where there had been only their own ships the day before, now an entire enemy fleet sat floating in their secure harbor. The psychological blow was devastating. It was as if a miracle had occurred for their enemies. The massive chain, their key to naval security, had been rendered useless in a single night. Now the city's sea walls, which were much less fortified than the land walls, were vulnerable to direct attack. The defenders were forced to divert precious troops and resources to this new front, stretching their already thin lines to the breaking point. Mehmed's genius maneuver had completely outflanked them, tightening the noose around the doomed city. After weeks of relentless bombardment and strategic maneuvering, the final chapter of the siege was about to be written. By late May, the mighty Theodosian walls were riddled with breaches. The defenders, exhausted, outnumbered, and running low on supplies, were at the end of their strength. But their spirit was not yet broken. Morale, however, was plummeting. Strange omens and prophecies seemed to foretell the city's fall. An eclipse of the moon, a thick fog that blanketed the city for days, these were interpreted as signs that God had abandoned them. Sultan Mehmed II offered one final chance for surrender. He promised to spare the lives of the citizens and allow the emperor to rule as a governor in another part of the empire. But the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, refused. He famously declared that he would not and could not give them the city. He would live or die with his people and his empire. His response sealed the city's fate, and his own. On the night of May 28th, the Ottoman camp was alive with activity. Fires were lit, and soldiers prayed and prepared for the final massive assault. Inside the city walls, a different scene unfolded. The people of Constantinople, Orthodox and Catholic alike, put aside their religious differences and gathered for one last, solemn service in the magnificent Hagia Sophia. The emperor was there, praying alongside his subjects, asking for forgiveness and preparing for the end. It was a poignant moment of unity in the face of annihilation. In the pre-dawn hours of May 29, 1453, the attack began. A thunderous roar of cannons, drums, and war cries shattered the morning stillness. Mehmed launched his forces in 3 successive waves. The first wave consisted of irregular troops, the Bashi Bazouks, whose job was to exhaust and wear down the defenders. They fought fiercely but were eventually repelled. The second wave, composed of better-equipped Anatolian troops, pressed the attack on a different section of the battered walls. They too were pushed back by the desperate, heroic defense. The defenders, led by the emperor himself and the brave Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, fought with the courage of men with nothing left to lose. They held the line against overwhelming odds. But then came the third and final wave, the Janissaries. These were the Sultan's elite, disciplined, and fanatical household troops. They advanced with grim determination, marching in perfect order through the smoke and chaos. The turning point came when a small group of Janissaries discovered that a small gate, the Kirka Porta, had been mistakenly left unbolted. They slipped through, climbed the inner wall, and raised the Ottoman standard. At almost the same time, the Genoese commander Giustiniani was gravely wounded. His removal from the battlefield caused panic and confusion among the defenders. The line began to waver. Seeing this, the Janissaries pressed their advantage, pouring through the breaches in the main wall. The defense collapsed. Emperor Constantine XI, seeing that all was lost, cast aside his imperial regalia and plunged into the thickest of the fighting, determined to die as a soldier alongside his men. His body was never definitively identified, lost in the final, desperate struggle for the city that he had sworn to protect. He became a martyr and a legend, the last Roman emperor. With the emperor's death and the collapse of the walls, the fight was over. Ottoman soldiers flooded into the city. The once great capital of the Eastern Roman Empire had fallen. The 1,000-year reign of Byzantium was at an end. Following the chaos of the final assault, Sultan Mehmed II made his triumphant entry into the captured city. He rode through the streets, not just as a conqueror, but as the new master of a legendary capital. He was reportedly moved to tears by the sight of the ruined but still magnificent city. Quoting Persian poetry about the transience of glory, he had achieved his life's ambition, earning the title Fatih, the Conqueror. Mehmed immediately took steps to secure his new capital and signal the dawn of a new era. His most symbolic act was to ride directly to the Hagia Sophia, the grand cathedral that had been the heart of Orthodox Christianity for nearly 1,000 years. He dismounted, entered the vast sanctuary, and, according to some accounts, took a handful of earth and sprinkled it over his turban as an act of humility before God. Inside the great church, terrified citizens who had sought refuge were assured of their safety. Mehmed then ordered that the building be converted into a mosque. An Islamic cleric ascended the pulpit and recited the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. With this single act, the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, became the Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque. The crosses were taken down, the Christian mosaics and frescoes were eventually covered with plaster, and minarets would soon be added to its exterior. This transformation was a powerful and unmistakable statement. It symbolized the end of the Byzantine Empire and the definitive establishment of Ottoman Islamic sovereignty over the city. Constantinople, the bastion of Christendom, was now to be the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The city, which would soon become known as Istanbul, was set on a new course, its identity forever changed, marking the end of one world and the beginning of another. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 wasn't just the end of a siege. It was the end of an era, a moment that sent shockwaves across the globe and reshaped the course of history. This event is often cited by historians as the definitive end of the Middle Ages. More profoundly, it marked the final, conclusive end of the Roman Empire. Think about that for a second. The Roman Empire, in one form or another, had existed for over 2,000 years. Even after the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, its legacy lived on in the East, in the Byzantine Empire, with Constantinople as its heart. For nearly 1,000 years after Rome fell, this eastern bastion carried the torch of Roman civilization, law, and culture. When its walls were finally breached, a direct, unbroken line stretching back to Augustus Caesar was severed forever. The last echo of Rome fell silent. The immediate aftermath of the conquest was a seismic shift in global trade. For centuries, Constantinople had been the bustling crossroads between Europe and Asia, the gateway through which the riches of the East, spices, silks, and other precious goods, flowed into the West. With the city now under Ottoman control, this vital artery was effectively severed for European merchants. The Ottomans now held the keys to the traditional land routes, and they imposed heavy taxes and controlled access, making the old ways of trade incredibly expensive and unreliable. This economic blockade created a sense of urgency in the courts of Europe. Nations like Portugal and Spain, situated on the Atlantic coast, realized they could no longer depend on the Mediterranean routes. They had to find another way. This necessity became the mother of exploration. It directly spurred the great maritime voyages that would define the next century. Monarchs began pouring resources into funding expeditions to find a sea route to India and the Spice Islands. It was this exact motivation that led a Genoese navigator named Christopher Columbus, sponsored by the Spanish crown, to sail west across the Atlantic, believing he could find a new path to the east. His voyage, and the many that followed, kicked off the Age of Discovery, fundamentally redrawing the map of the world and connecting continents in ways never before imagined. All of this was a direct consequence of the fall of one city. Beyond the economic and political shifts, the fall of Constantinople had a monumental cultural impact. As the Ottoman armies closed in on the city, a great intellectual migration began. Byzantine scholars, artists, priests, and thinkers, fearing for their lives and the destruction of their heritage, fled the city. They packed what they could, but most importantly, they carried with them a treasure trove of knowledge that had been largely lost to Western Europe for centuries. They brought with them priceless manuscripts of ancient Greek philosophy, science, literature, and history, the works of Plato, Aristotle, Herodotus, and Thucydides, preserved in their original language. Many of these scholars found refuge in the thriving city-states of Italy, particularly Florence and Venice. When they arrived, they were welcomed into a world already bubbling with new ideas and a renewed interest in classical antiquity. This infusion of Greek texts and knowledge acted as a powerful catalyst, pouring fuel on the fire of the burgeoning Renaissance. It allowed Western European thinkers to engage directly with the foundational texts of classical thought, no longer relying on fragmented or translated Latin versions. This intellectual cross-pollination sparked new developments in art, science, philosophy, and politics, fundamentally shaping the humanist worldview that defined the Renaissance and laid the groundwork for the modern world. In a very real sense, the fall of the Byzantine East helped ignite the intellectual dawn of the modern West. Finally, the conquest of Constantinople cemented the rise of a new global power. For Sultan Mehmed II, taking the city was more than a military victory. It was the fulfillment of a long-held Islamic prophecy and the realization of his empire's destiny. He immediately moved the Ottoman capital from Edirne to Constantinople, renaming it Istanbul. The city was not just a prize. It became the heart of a vast and powerful Islamic empire that would dominate the Eastern Mediterranean, North Africa, and Southeastern Europe for centuries to come. The Hagia Sophia, the grand cathedral of Eastern Christendom, was converted into an imperial mosque, a potent symbol of this new world order. Under Ottoman rule, Istanbul was transformed. It became a vibrant, multicultural metropolis, a center of Islamic art, architecture, and learning. The Ottoman Empire stood as a formidable rival to the Christian powers of Europe, and its presence would define international politics for the next 400 years. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just the end of the Roman Empire. It was the birth of the Ottoman Empire as a world superpower, with Istanbul as its magnificent and strategic capital standing at the crossroads of continents and civilizations.